Bit of an historic day for the Liberals, and to that end, we're going to talk about this more on our debate. And here's our cast of characters tonight. In the nation's capital, Steve Applin, Vice President at the energy consulting firm, the HDP Group. And with us here in studio, Elise Herzig, President and CEO of the Ontario Energy Association. Will Stewart, Principal at Navigator Limited, that's a public affairs and communications consulting firm. And Polino Koliakovo, Managing Director at Morrison Park Advisors and Independent Investment Bank. Good to have everybody around the table here. Steve Applin, good to have you on the line from Ottawa as always. I want to start by just picking up on something that Brad Duguid and I were talking about, which was what role energy played in the results of the last election. And to that end, let me read something off the top here from a group called Wind Concerns Ontario, which are not happy with the windmills going up all over the place. And they said each rural riding with an incumbent Liberal MPP was targeted, including those of Ministers Carol Mitchell, Leona Dombrowski, and John Wilkinson, and some were visited numerous times leading up to the election. In addition, WCO members worked also to provide support to existing incumbent PCs. The momentum and impact of Wind Concerns Ontario's work in these ridings was clearly responsible for the results. Let's get into that. Will Stewart, you used to be a Chief of Staff to a Minister of Energy, yes, maybe a decade and a half ago. Are these folks right? Did they take down those three cabinet ministers?
I think it'd be very difficult to say that single-handedly they brought down those cabinet ministers, but I think it is fair to say that they certainly contributed to their downfall. And I don't think it was because they were rabble-rousing or being quoted in the local newspaper. What I actually think matters is in campaigns, people matter. And I think it motivated a group of people, namely farmers and others who didn't like to see wind turbines in their area for whatever reason, actually got out and onto the hustings. They handed out literature, they knocked on doors, they actually provided some of the sweat labor that makes campaigns run in Ontario. And I think that certainly contributed to it, because they otherwise wouldn't have done that.
From your perch, Steve Applin, in Eastern Ontario, did it look like energy had a significant role in the outcome of the election?
Yeah, to me it did. The Premier really talked up the Green Energy Act. And Wind Concerns Ontario, yeah, they're a very active organization. I thought they were pretty effective in playing the media. They got a lot of stuff on CBC. And you know, it took, there were 7 rural ministers, Liberal, or not Liberal members who lost. And wind turbines were a big issue across that whole area. So yeah, I think that it did play a role.
Elise, how do you see it?
We see it a little bit differently in that a few months ago, energy seemed to be the #1 concern of voters. We saw that on your agenda cap when you were going from city to city. And then what happened is closer to the election, 5 core issues came up and energy wasn't part of them. But what was interesting is that jobs and the economy was. So on that level, the Green Energy Act did promote things that gave a message to the public that we're pretty stable compared to what's happening in Greece or in other jurisdictions.
Polino, how about you?
If you look at the difference between the 2007 and 2011 elections, the Liberal government lost 18 seats. 5 of those are in urban ridings, 3 are in the north, and 10, broadly speaking, were in rural areas across Ontario. And a number of those rural seats don't have wind turbines in them or proposed wind farms. I mean, it's reasonable to say that in a few of those ridings, you know, there might have been a bit of a swing that came from the efforts of that group. But to make a blanket statement that all rural ridings were affected by this, I think is going a bit too far.
A little more complex than that. Well, let me pick up on the conventional wisdom, because I thought, Will, to you first on this, I thought some of rural Ontario loved the Green Energy Act because all those farmers were signing big contracts, you know, feed-in tariff contracts. They were going to get paid a lot of money, certainly more than market rates, in order to plug in and get those renewables going. Signing long-term contracts with Ontario Power Generation and so on, and then laugh all the way to the bank. Yep. Now that should have been, if that's true, they should have voted Liberal. So how come is that not true?
I think the people who got the contracts and the people who have the turbines on their fields, their farmers, I think, yeah, they're probably happy with this. But you look at everybody else that doesn't have them up, and they see it as infringing on their property values, dropping their property values, and not being able to have the same sight lines that they had before. And I think people got pretty worked up about it. The wind turbines are usually clustered together in some measure, and not everybody gets one. I think it absolutely played a role. You only have to drive through parts of rural Ontario to see the Stop the Wind Turbines signs. They're in virtually every small community outside of the 416 when you drive around. They've been up for years, and people were pretty upset about it. So it wasn't a blanket approval of these things. The second factor, I think, is that people didn't have a choice. the municipal councils, because of the Green Energy Act, the municipal councils, the mayors, the reeves, right across this province, weren't giving the planning authority anymore to be able to say, no, we don't want them in our community. All of those decisions rested in downtown Toronto. That gave the mayors and the councils free rein to oppose those things vocally and often, and I think that led to some of the public support waning on windmills.
Elise, did you hear that too? Irritants that local authorities didn't have enough authority?
I think it's really going back to the process of how do we engage communities in a meaningful way. If we're going to call it a consultation process, let it be a consultation
You really got to
process.
consult.
Exactly. And so I think we've learned from the recent decisions that we've all seen that something's wrong with the system, and I think there's opportunities now for us to fix it.
Steve Applin, help me with this though, because theoretically, if you've got big windmills or whatever, some kind of new renewable project on your property values are going to go up, whether it's on a farmer's field or whether it's along, the shores of Lake Huron, and the municipality should be realizing a lot more revenue as a result. Now, again, wouldn't that make this popular?
Perhaps, but I think what Will said has some relevance. Not everybody benefited from this; just a few did, and the people who didn't, it's not like they all bid on it, and the losers are sore losers. I think that just by its nature, only a few people can get these things. They're huge. They're very visible, and once people, and not only are they very visible, and with all the aspects that go along with having them physically in your neighborhood, there are other aspects to wind turbines as well that other people don't like, and it's just, we're paying a lot of money for the electricity that they produce. The electricity is low quality. We can get high quality electricity that's much more reliable from other sources, and I think the people in those areas might have taken a much more critical view, and that might have played a role in local opposition to them.